A very good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Abhinav Bindra Foundation, we welcome all of you to the second episode of our webinar series, Olympism and its Values. Through this monthly webinar series, we aim to initiate conversations and exchange ideas on how to move towards building a peaceful and more inclusive world by leveraging the power of sport. We kicked off the inaugural session in August with our panelists, Dr. Jog, Alexandra, and Dr. Kora, engaging and discussing ideas on the relevance of Olympic movement in the post-COVID era and its implication for the civil society. For today's webinar, our panelists, ranging from members of the International Olympic Committee to thought leaders in their areas, will be focusing on the various ways through which we can integrate and implement the learnings of Olympism in our education system. Fittingly, today's discourse is titled Olympic Values Education, an Opportunity to Empower Young Indians. Before we begin, we would like to thank all our partners for their support. Olympic Studies Center, German Sports University Cologne as our knowledge partner, International Institute of Sports Management as our sports education partner, Geetam as our education partner, The Bridge as our media partner. And also like to thank Sai LNCP for helping us outreach of this webinar to academic institutions. Now I would like to introduce the moderator for today's session, Sudha Sastri, who is a renowned sports and values evangelist and also serve as an advisor to Abhinav Bindra Foundation. After graduating from IIM Calcutta, Sudha spent her first 25 years helping corporate nurture their talent with a very specific focus on the values. Recognizing the power of sport in building the right values, her big focus now is to bring together all key stakeholders for sporting excellence and sports for all. She's actively working with corporate, schools, and universities to create programs that leverage the power of sport to develop healthy and holistic individuals. I would now like to invite our moderator for the session, Sudha Sastri, and request her to lead today's session. Welcome, Sudha.
Thank you, Amit. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be moderating today's session. As an HR professional, I've spent many years trying to figure out the drivers of human behavior and what needs to be done to change it. No matter where I start, it always comes down to an individual's values and beliefs. Values are the single most significant driver of behavior. It therefore follows that if you want people to behave in a certain manner, the values that help make that choice need to be developed at the right age. Parents, teachers, educationists, and society therefore play a very key role in this. Our webinar today is to help us understand this better, and we have some really eminent speakers with us today. I would like to kick this off by inviting Abhinav Bindra to share his perspective and to set the context for today's discussion. Welcome, Abhinav.
Thank you.
Abhinav, what led to your belief that values are critical? I mean, you are our first athletics gold medalist, and why have you chosen this area, and why are you focusing on this area specifically?
Well, I was involved in competitive sport for 22 years, where my singular focus was for sporting performance on the field of play. And now that I've exited my investment of sorts and no longer an active athlete, I look back at my career much more dispassionately. And I look back at it not at the few victories that I had along the way, or the few medals that hang on a wall in my house, but I look back at my sports career and what it made me, and what the process of winning that gold medal made me as a person. The values of Olympism, the values of sport continue to be with me and will remain with me for the rest of my life. The values of friendship, excellence, and respect were were part and parcel of that 22-year-old journey. What I look back to it is at the relationships that I was able to build, with my mom and dad, for example. It gave me an opportunity to spend more time with my dad as a young boy. It gave me more chance to bond with my mother, who traveled with me as a 12-year-old boy to Germany when I started sport and when I started competition. It is the relationships that I was able to build with my coaches, with my support staff, with even my competitors. So, those are things which I look back at with a lot of fondness. Sport, of course, also taught me how to win, but more importantly, it also taught me how to lose. It taught me, the values of honesty, of having integrity. It taught me how to set a goal and work towards trying to achieve the goal. So these are values which remain very, very close to my heart. And I believe that these values remain relevant to everybody, especially in our countries, which has a very young demographic. I mean, 50% of our population below the age of 23. And I think sport can play a very, very meaningful and powerful role in shaping our society in the future. Not everybody needs to play competitive sport. Not everybody needs to go to the Olympic Games. But I think everybody can benefit from the values of Olympism and imbibe those values in their day-to-day life. I'd just like to end by saying, we're all after economic success and, trying to become a successful economy, a $5 trillion economy and all that kind of stuff is often talked about. But what is very interesting to see is, all the great economic powers around the world also happen to be great sporting superpowers. And I believe that's not happened by accident, that they're good economies. They've all these successful people, all these successful business houses have all imbibed values from sport as young boys and girls. And I'm sure they remain true to them and true to their entire pursuit in whatever form or shape that takes. So this is my endeavor. I'm really committed to this, very passionate about it, because I think it can play a hugely impactful role in nation building.
Okay, great perspective. Thanks, Abhinav. All great superpowers, economic superpowers, also have great sporting cultures. So, does Olympism really play a role in creating people who make economic superpowers? Okay, our key speaker today would probably be able to shed some light on that aspect. Our key speaker today is Xenia Kyrgyzova. She's the Education Manager, Senior Olympic Foundation. She's also the IOC lead for Olympic Value Education Program. Xenia works for the Olympic Foundation for Culture and Heritage and manages the Olympic Values Education Program. Xenia's career started in education, and her rich experience includes the development and implementation of educational products in Canada, Guatemala, and Eastern Europe. Throughout her career, she has taught, trained instructors, designed field projects, evaluated and coached students, formulated curricula and lesson plans. After joining the IOC in 2013, Xenia developed several e-learning projects, created and conducted onboarding and induction programs, organized webinars, training sessions, and managed communities of stakeholders. She holds a master's degree in comparative history and knowledge management. Welcome, Xenia, and we look forward to your inputs. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I could have not introduced myself better than you just did it. Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation. I'm here today to talk about OVEP, the program that I'm managing, and to invite everyone to start living the Olympic values. Okay, just tweaking a bit. I saw that we have a lot of schools on board today attending this webinar, a lot of teachers, which is very exciting for me because I think you're the main channels through which the program can be delivered to our target audiences, which is youth and which is what Mr. Bindra already mentioned, constitute the biggest part of India's population. Over 50% of India's population is under the age of 25, which is the target group of OVAP, the ages from 6 to 25. So what is OVAP? You will find, if you browse through many websites, you will find different definitions. Oftentimes, we cite OVAP as, a combination of several toolkits that allow us to implement the Olympic Values education program. And here you see one of these definitions saying it's a set of learning resources designed to inspire and to allow young people to experience the three key life values on which the Olympic movement is built: excellence, respect, and friendship. While it's true that the program is built upon these learning resources, the program itself is so much more than this today. We have a network of implementation partners in different countries. We have a network of the culture and education champions with whom we work to implement different programs. The overall aim is, of course, to realize the Olympic ideal of building a better world through sport. It's important to mention that for us, we do this through a specific learning process, which involves the whole body, not just the mind. I will elaborate on this a little bit more during my presentation, but it's not only about learning through specific concepts, but it's also involving your whole body in the learning process, which makes this program stand out and make it different from the other similar programs. We teach the life skills, values, and we focus on fostering lifelong love for sport and participation in sport because it's very important. It creates the healthy lifestyle. And of course, the toolkit itself, I will talk about toolkits many times during this presentation, and you can always go online and find it on our official website. But the toolkit itself aims to enrich the existing educational materials that you already have in your country, and aims to inspire you to build upon your subject matter and enrich it with the OVAP materials and make your teaching program richer than it is today. All this happens, of course, with the respect for cultural diversity. We have over 200 NOCs, and each NOC is different with its own objectives, with its own interests, with its own cultural subtleties. So we make sure that it's not for each of you to fit into the OVAP framework, but that OVAP should adapt to your needs and your differences. Where did it all begin? Of course, it started with Pierre de Coubertin, who brought Olympism back into our lives. And he stressed that we need to create a life based on joy of efforts, show the good example, build on social responsibility, and foster the respect for universal fundamental ethical principles. And of course, he came up with the three values, excellence, friendship, and respect, that are today the backbone of the Olympic movement, and sort of a backbone on which all our activities are built. So what does it look like today? As we have a lot of teachers with us today on this presentation, I'd like to encourage you to really look at what OVAP has to offer and how you can adapt it to your teaching philosophy, to your lesson plans, to your lesson activities, because I think it might look scary when you look at it. There's so many excellent, wonderful programs built around OVAP. Some of them require huge resources, of course, but I have to say, you don't need a lot to start implementing OVAP in your classroom. There are a lot of resources that you can use. I'll share some of the activities that our partners are implementing at the moment. But you really don't need much. You don't need big budgets. You don't need expensive infrastructures. You don't need a lot of workforce to implement OVEP. What you need is to take a little bit of interest in what OVEP is and what it can do for you. If you need help, we are always available, of course. There is my email, the email of the program at the end of this presentation, where you can email and ask your questions. But in its essence today, if we look at the key activities around which OVEP is built, it's of course, the first thing that comes in mind is of course the programs and projects implemented by our key partners, National Olympic Committees, national and international and Olympic academies, and we have several local implementation partners for OVEP. It's of course education through sport, and the big examples that you can see during the games of values being lived through and sort of shown by the athletes is probably what we are the most proud of. That means we've been successfully passing the message on what the Olympic values are. And our athletes living through these values is the perfect example of what Olympism is all about. It's educational and youth programs run by the organizing committees. So we have specific programs for each edition of the games, and each organizing committee decides how they want to implement OVEP, how they want to manage education, and what educational programs and activities they'd like to choose. There are many Olympic and sports youth camps that use the OVEP themes and that really promote values in their programs. There are, of course, activities of the Olympic Museum Network. So many countries have their own Olympic museums or museums that use Olympic themes in their expositions and activities. And we have text-based and digital materials in all official languages of the UN that could be used by different countries and teachers who are interested. So to summarize, these are the big programs that are usually managed and implemented by a number of stakeholders, but you don't have to be a part of one of the big organizations to implement OVEP. You can do it in your school with minimum of resources. If you look at the OVEP toolkit, you will have some practical exercises, of course, that you can do in your school, and activities that you can organize, Olympic days or Olympic weeks, or just a half a day per week that you can dedicate to doing physical activities and link it to a specific Olympic value. These materials are also excellent for implementation in the COVID context, where a lot of kids are homeschooled and parents are looking for materials to use for doing with them at home when the school is not an option. Flipped classroom is another option where you give your kids materials to read on about Olympic history, Olympic movements, Olympic Games, and then you have a discussion about it in your classroom, and you do activities on these topics and on the subjects, such as passing the torch or identifying Olympic symbols, etc., etc. So there are a lot of things that you can do. I only have so much time today to try and tell you about what's available. But there's much more that exists today. If you do a little bit of searching on the internet, you'll find the programs that are implemented in different countries. I'll share the 2 examples with you today, but there is many more. The objective of today for me is to inspire you to look into it and try and do something at your school and with your students. But beyond this, there is a wealth of information that you can look into and take it to the next level if you'd like to do that. Underneath all these projects, of course, the idea is that learning is not meant to memorize the facts or to, remember all the games edition one after another. Learning is about changing for us. So the important thing here is to make sure that a student who is not very sure of himself, who doesn't have a lot of confidence, who doesn't think he's a sporty person, who thinks that, academics are more important than sports activities, at some point realizes that your physical and mental health is closely linked, that improving your physical performance usually leads to improving your academic performance. And we have the stats that prove that. Kids who are moving daily, at least 30 minutes a day is the recommendation for teens, I believe. Kids who are moving daily have better performance at school. They are calmer, they at lower risk of depression, they're more self-confident. So it's all about changing the way a child or a young person feels about himself and about his own capacities. The audiences that we work with, so teachers being one of them, and schools are the change actors for us. So we are able to coach you to deliver certain programs or do certain activities. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to become these change actors in your community and lead the change. By engaging the right audiences, and we have so many, of course, the target audience for us is young people and youth, but all the people that we work with to reach to these communities are equally important to us. So we'd like to have that mutual relationship of bringing the right change that we'd like to see. And that right change is all built on the common values that we all share. And of course, underneath this, what we have is formal versus non-formal approach. It can be as formal as you'd like it to be. We'd love for OVEP to be embedded into national curriculum of each country. It's not always possible because some educational systems are very complex, some are very fragmented, for some it's just not a priority. So it doesn't always have to be formalized. It can be also a very non-formal approach where you in your classroom decide that starting today or tomorrow, you will start introducing some of the OVEP activities in your daily curriculum. So to summarize, OVEP is not a static program. It's true, it may look like it if you look at the toolkit. We have the 4 toolkits, we have the exercises, activities cards, but it's not static. It can be adapted to your specific needs and it can blend into your cultural context. We have some countries who experience issues with youth crime. So they may take OVEP curriculum and adapt it to prevent youth crime or take kids off the streets or engage the communities who are vulnerable. We have, island nations who are interested in clean ocean, clean water, sustainability. So they may take that take on OVEP and approach it from the angle of respect to nature and respect to the environment, respect to the future generations. So you need to think what's important for you and how you can blend your specific education needs, your specific student audiences, and integrate OVEP in it. Because OVEP is ever blending and adapting to different cultures, it's only becoming richer. So thanks to all of you, thanks to all our partners, thanks to all of the experts who are working with OVEP, we're building a very specific and unique expertise. And this expertise is built through practice. And our wish in the future is, of course, for this practice to be shared across different NOCs, different countries, different OVEP practitioners. And when we develop this practice, it will grow eventually in capacity building for different NOCs, but it's also all about developing this common understanding and common experience around OVEP and international value-based education. And I put the hashtag stronger together because it's really all about being stronger together. Some NOCs that have successfully implemented OVEP in the past are now coaching other NOCs to replicate their success and to make similar programs in their countries. So it's very exciting for us to see. It's really about coming together, united by the three values that OVEP represents, and all about building this international expertise around such a unique topic. So I wanted to share a couple of examples with you of what our partners are doing. I have two examples here, but there's many more, I have to assure you. And hopefully India will become a next example for that as well. Here you will see an example. I chose very short videos of what these programs are, but if you go on Google, YouTube, and you search for example, for Dare to Believe or Lithuanian Olympic Committee programs, you will find a little bit more information about what their programs are and what they're doing in terms of implementing OVEP on the ground. So Dare to Believe is OVEP program managed by the Irish Olympic Committee. I'll give you a short preview of what it looks like. So Ireland has been very successful with its program, and they actually make an additional program for each edition of the Games, which they call Road to. So most recently they did Road to Tokyo, and I think you can find more information on their website. Their program is heavily focused on get kids moving, get them off the couch, away from TV, and make sure that they move more. So it was all about collecting steps and doing little physical exercises every day. Again, reality of each country is very different. Some countries don't have issue with their kids walking. Some kids in some countries walk 5-10 kilometers to go to school daily. So that's where you'll need to see what your needs really are and adapt the program to your specific situation. So moving on to the next example, that's Lithuanian Olympic Committee. They've been very active in terms of Olympic education and Olympic education programs. I wanted to show you this example because you can see that they've created a series of resources of what can be done during the confinement, during COVID crisis, when everyone stays at home, to get kids moving. And they actually show that you don't need a lot to do these activities. I'll start with the video on the right with a little dog and a ball of paper. And I'll explain it to you because it's in Lithuanian, but basically what you need is either a stuffed toy, or even if you don't have a toy, you can just crumble a piece of paper. And by building a structure with 2 chairs and a little blanket over it, you can create sort of a net, and the child can throw toy or a piece of paper around and run and catch it. You'll see what it looks like on practice. I'll play the video. So you see, you don't need a lot of resources to actually implement one of these activities, you just need to either look at what others are doing, what OVEP toolkit is proposing, or even come up with your own resources to invent activities. And if you do invent activities that could enrich OVEP offering, please share them with us, because it's always interesting to know what you guys are doing and how you manage these activities on your side. They also created a mascot to engage kids. So this mascot is actually helping both teachers and kids and leads them in the series of activities that kids are doing. So these are just a couple of examples, but again, there's so many more that exist today and that you can invent yourselves, because, apologies, that you can invent yourself for your own context and your own classrooms. So why implement OVEP and why we're doing this? It's actually quite interesting, because just this morning, there was a Center for Disease Prevention that published a new report saying that child obesity actually became worse since the beginning of the COVID crisis, which is not surprising because we're all staying at home and moving a lot less. The child obesity since 2019 actually grew by 3%. Might not seem like a lot, but it's a huge increase. It went from 19% to 22% in about a year and a half. So it's about getting kids moving on one hand, but it's also all about coming together during this difficult time. Stronger Together is the hashtag that I've been mentioning, but it's really coming together around the common values and common understanding of what a healthy lifestyle should be. The three values are driving us in everything we do at the Olympic Committee, but we feel that it can really enrich a child's life and the future if the child adopts a healthy lifestyle from the beginning. And the understanding that a lifelong physical activity actually contributes to improving the quality of life is essential here. So what we do is completely supported by the Agenda 2020+5. We have 3 recommendations on which we're basing our future activities. First is grow digital engagement with people. If you look at the OVEP resources today, you will notice that there's not a lot. It's a pretty static offering at the moment. We have the toolkit. We have a lot of resources scattered over different internet sites and programs that are implemented by our partners. But with this recommendation, we really hope to change that. And on one hand, OVEP will become more digital, but we will still keep in mind that we deal with different cultural and economical contexts. So we'll keep that paper-based approach as well and provide a lot of resources that could be either downloaded or delivered to different countries physically. The goal is, of course, to strengthen the role of sports as an enabler for the UN Sustainable Goals. So we do have partnerships with UN agencies to develop various educational programs. I don't have a lot of time to talk about it here, but if you follow the news that we usually share through our Olympics pages, you'll learn more about this because we usually share the updates about our international cooperations there. And of course, reach out beyond the Olympic community because we feel like Olympic fans usually follow what we do and really share the same values and interests that we do. But we'd like to go beyond it. We'd like to reach out to those who are not as engaged with sports, who are not as confident to say we can practice sports daily, we'd like to, learn more about it. To those for whom sports is just not something that is of interest to them in their daily life, would like to change that and would really like to engage more with these young kids and make sure that they get to move, that they get to learn more about sports, that they adopt a healthy lifestyle. So I've talked a lot, and I'm sure we'll have a couple of questions in the discussion a little bit later on. So I'll leave it here with a big thank you for organizing this. And with this contact email, obep@olympic.org, this is the generic address that we receive all our requests on. If you have any questions or if you have any comments after this webinar, feel free to share. And if you'd like to share, if you feel inspired by what I presented to you today, and you'd like to try OVEP in your school, and you come up with something interesting and innovating, something that you're proud of, just share it with us. And it's always interesting for us to hear back from you, from the real experience on the ground, on how you manage to implement it and how you manage to make it your own at the end. So thanks a lot. And I'm looking forward to the discussion part.
Thank you. Thank you, Xenia. That was wonderful. So we had Abhinav talk about how, what he really took away from his Olympic journey were the values, the relationships, the experience that means a lot more than the medals on the wall. And on the other hand, we have Xenia talk about, how values that are built through the sporting experience help children become calmer, more resilient, less prone to depression, and also better academically. I think a couple of other points you made, Xenia. One is about the toolkit and how it can be integrated. It can blend into any cultural context and can be done with minimal infrastructure. But I think what was most interesting to me is the fact that it is very relevant to COVID times. And I think given the current situation everywhere, I think that is of extreme importance. The fact that it can be used to re-establish and get children back into moving and playing sport. So thank you for that. I think, we'll move on now to the panel discussion. And the panel really is about taking whatever Abhinav and Xenia have said and using it in the context of India and our education system. What can we do to make it relevant to us? Okay, so we have a very eminent set of panelists here. I'll start off by introducing them. First up is Shaheen Mistry, CEO, Teach for India. A huge CV, but I'm going to try and give you a little summary. Shaheen grew up in 5 countries, returned to India when she was 18 to start Akanksha. The aim was to provide children from low-income communities with a kind of education that would maximize their potential. Today, Akanksha has served more than 9,300 kids in the last 17 years. In 2008, Shaheen founded Teach for India with the audacious vision of providing an excellent education to children across India through building a pipeline of leaders committed to ending educational inequity in India. Teach for India today impacts approximately 32,000 children across 7 regions in the country. Shaheen has also created projects like Maya Musical, Kids Education Revolution, the TFIX, which is basically a year-long incubator program for passionate entrepreneurs who are willing to adapt TFI's model to their context, especially in rural areas. Shaheen has been an Ashoka Fellow, a global leader for tomorrow at the World Economic Forum, and an Asia Society 21 leader. She holds a bachelor's degree from St. Xavier's College, Mumbai, a master's from the University of Manchester, and is a celebrated author. I guess I could go on, but for the time being, I'm going to stop there. Welcome, Shaheen. We look forward to hearing from you. Our next panelist is Anil Sachdeva. Anil is the founder and CEO of Grow Talent Company Limited and the School of Inspired Leadership, SOIL. Grow Talent was created in July 2000 and became a leader in strategic HR consulting. It enabled a large number of global and local firms to achieve breakthrough performance by realizing the potential of their people and creating a talent advantage. In 2008, Anil and other founders of Grow Talent, entered the field of education by creating SOIL. SOIL stands for the School of Inspired Leadership. This school has been co-created by a consortium of 32 leading firms, and it focuses on the 5 pillars of inspired leadership: compassion, diversity, ethics, mindfulness, and sustainability. Anil is active in management circles, has held several public offices. He's also a member of the academic committee of CEDEP, the leading leadership institute of Europe. He's a member of the World Compassion Council based in Seattle and a trustee of the Chinmaya Mission. He also serves on the global board of the Shizenkan University in Tokyo. Personally, Anil has been very influential in my journey as a values evangelist. So welcome, Anil. Thank you for being here. Our third panelist is Dr. Marion Kay. She's chairperson, Foundation for Sports, Development and Peace. She's also a member of the IOC Olympic Education Commission, President Pierre de Coubertin Committee, South Africa. Dr. Marion Kay is an associate professor in the Social Transformation and Peace program at the University of Western Cape. She lectures in conflict, diversity and peace, leadership and social transformation, and sport and community development. She's an advisory board member of Women for Peace in the Western Cape and an advocate for the High Court of South Africa. She works in the fields of social transformation, community and sports development, and peace building. She's been teaching and conducting research in South Africa, Malawi, Germany, and the US since 1985, and has been coordinating numerous provincial, national, and bilateral community development projects targeting children, youth, women, street children, and teachers. Welcome, Dr. Kay. I think without wasting any more time, let's just get on to the panel discussion. Shaheen, I'd like to start with you, right? Your personal journey is really an example of how values drive people's careers, as is your TFI leadership program, right? The fellow program. So walk us through that journey and tell us a little more about it.
Thanks, Sudha. And how beautiful. I had never heard this term, a values evangelist. It's beautiful. So so happy and privileged to be here with a group of people thinking deeply about values. You know, my own journey, it's such a beautiful question of where values became important on my journey. I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is every time I see a problem in the world, I can somehow trace it back to a breakdown in values. And I really see that just so consistently, whether you're talking about the environmental crisis and greed, whether you're talking about violence and a lack of respect. It just feels like such an important journey for each one of us to take as human beings, let alone as professionals. So I think that idea I have held very close to my heart, that a lot of my own journey is really just taking tiny little steps forwards, often backwards as well, in the pursuit of values. Part of that, I think, also came from growing up in a faith. So I grew up in a Parsi family, and one of the things that Dad used to continually remind me of was that our faith talked about 3 simple concepts: good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And I never learned too much else about the faith, but I found myself going back to that idea a lot. How does one really think good thoughts, say good words, and do good deeds? And how can you continuously sort of stop and evaluate where you are on that journey? So I think really I was spoiled for having so many examples around me of people that demonstrated values. I think the difficult thing with being an educator is you realize that the tough thing about values, despite the fact that I think, the stuff that Xenia spoke about is so beautiful, like to have the toolkits and the resources are such a massive help. But the really tough thing is the educator needs to live those values and be on the journey of practicing those values. So I think for me, the work that I do outside, I realize somewhere along the line is a reflection of the work that I do inside. And it's very messy work of living and practicing values, both at work, but then in my own journey within myself as well.
Wonderful. And your fellows are now working in many schools, right? How important is imparting value education? Is that part of the process that your teachers go through? I mean, is it intrinsic to the way they are taught to teach?
Yeah, I mean, it's the most important thing, I think. And I don't think it's separate. I think for it to really work, we need to find ways of helping teachers and students see it as beautifully integrated into content. So at TFI, we actually train around 8, we call them the 8 C's. We've made them into little characters, but they are 21st century skills and values like courage and creativity, communication, curiosity, beautiful, beautiful concepts. And what we're saying is don't teach these in isolation, but build them into your practices. So curiosity gets built by encouraging children to ask questions. Critical thinking gets built every time you push a child to say, but why? And as a teacher, are you asking yourself, why am I teaching what I'm teaching? So it gets built, I think, through practices. It gets built through curriculum and toolkits similar to the one we just heard about. And it gets built, I think, with the teacher having the vulnerability and authenticity to be really himself or herself in the classroom and to show that, like, I'm not perfect. Every day, there are many examples of me not living in small ways the values that I hold true. And how can we be on this journey together as partners, really asking ourselves, am I one little step ahead each day in this work of becoming a better human being? The last thing I'll say on that is we fundamentally feel like the most important thing to shift in education is actually the North Star itself. Like, what's the purpose of education? And, if we were asking at the beginning of the school year, not just what is the academic content my kids need to pass the exams, but what kind of human beings do we want our children to be? What are the values we want them to master? Our actions would be fundamentally different. And so we're actually saying, can we expand the purpose of education, the North Star, from self, which is an important dimension, to other, the way I interact with others in the world. And I love the values of respect and friendship there. And to the idea of change making. Like, can I come to school as a student really to make the world a better place, and come in every day saying, how can I identify problems around me, and how can I try solutions? And if they don't work, it doesn't matter. I'm going to keep practicing. But the attempt is to create something and shift something that goes beyond myself.
Lovely. Thank you so much. The purpose of education. Anil, you've been a part of corporate world and leadership training for 40 years now. And yet, you chose to set up an institution focused on values. Do you see a relationship between the two? And, walk us through your thinking process.
When I was a little child, I heard this and experienced this, that the most important aspect, my parents told me, the most important part of your life is not a thing. The most valuable thing is not a thing. And they mentioned that it's what you acquire as a character is going to be really the most important gift you can give to yourself. And my parents said to us at a young age, see, there are 3 critical questions for you. Who are you? And why are you here? And what will you do with that self-awareness and knowledge? And he said, all that you are trying to study, doesn't matter whether you are studying humanities or you're studying liberal arts or sciences or engineering, is ultimately to discover the answers to these questions. And I learned very early when my father, as an army officer working in the country, was earning a certain amount of money. He used to take 10% of that every month and give it to the children who didn't have enough. When we were 6 siblings, and my sister would sometimes complain that she needed an extra dress, and my father would smile and say, "At least you have a dress. This is meant for those." And because we were in the army cantonments, we used to see this practice of values. Here are the officers and the jawans and everybody early morning getting up and playing together contact sports. And the way they kind of became one family and the way they stood for each other. And here is now today you are on mosque duty, tomorrow you are on a church duty, and day after tomorrow you are on the duty of the Gurudwara. So the kind of oneness that we experience and the importance of the fact that there is oneness which unites every human being. And in all the schools we were part of, I understood early what Shaheen said, you always teach who you are, irrespective of what you teach. So I committed to myself that if I am getting concerned about the way the world of business is growing and organizations are having tremendous power, global companies have more power than even governments. And I said to myself, if organizations could become places for doing more good, and if we could take responsibility for the way we live now, then we could transform this world that we were living in. And I thought that the business could truly become a vehicle for more good. And having worked in companies like Aisha, where Sudha, you and I worked together, where we understood and practiced the power of what values were all about, I said to myself that when we sign up for setting up a school, the very admission process would put disproportionate amount of focus on values. To me, it's not how much analytical intelligence that you can test through a score like a GMAT, but it really was asking questions. What do students dream about? And what are they willing to take responsibility for? And we understood that there were 5 dimensions to it. The most important came out of the practice of mindfulness, the practice of being fully present. And in our curriculum, and we are into higher education, we have a 3-credit course on the practice of mindfulness. And then we said, all that good sports teaches us and the great experience of being in the outdoors in nature teaches us for us to be together is really understanding how to understand each other better, how to develop the sense of empathy, and how to help each other to win. Because this was very clear to me, in Japan, where I was there for a few months on a fellowship many years back, I learned that in nursery schools in Japan, they had made toys that were heavy so that no child could lift the toy by herself. It required a team to do that. Yeah? And what a thoughtful practice. And so we said to ourselves that, we, instead of talking about empathy, we are going to have a practice of empathy. One day in a week, our students would work with an NGO and practice the process of serving, so that through that service, they would experience compassion rather than reading about it and things like that. Now, number 3, we said, because you have to do as what Shaheen's father taught, the 3 wonderful principles, good thought, good words, good deeds. This is really what practice of ethics is about. And we said we will transport ourselves into the future by putting ourselves into dilemmas. And we worked with the top theater artists in simulating lessons in the classroom, where we would use the power of theater to simulate what happens in a company when you have to take this decision, what happens in a business, and what are the ethical dilemmas that you are facing. So rather than give lectures on ethics, we have this very powerful methodology based on theater. Number 4, we said diversity is going to be the most important. How can you help a team to win? By honoring the uniqueness in each person. I learned early lessons about Michael Jordan and the Chicago clubs, and had the opportunity to meet the people who were involved with the coaching process there, to say, as long as Jordan was playing for himself, they never won the NBA title. But when he was using his excellence to make the team win, they became the champions for 3 years in a row. So we understood honoring each other's uniqueness. So we started making the students aware to work in teams, saying Sudha is good in this, Anil is good in this, Shaheen is good in that. How do we recognize each other's uniqueness and learn to play together to raise the whole thing? So the whole design of all projects in our school are done in teams with this recognition. Lastly, just like the Finnish education does, we told our people all that we teach in management and leadership is finally taking responsibility for a particular problem. So we have a boot camp in which students say, for example, you are concerned about the air pollution in Gurgaon. How will you apply all your thinking and all the wonderful gifts that you have to come together to make a difference in the values that you care for? So take responsibility, learn this whole aspect of developing ownership for an idea. And in the time that you are here, make a difference. So that's how you will make sustainability happen. When you pick one problem that is impacting our society and our community, and together as a class, pick up that challenge. So they pick up a sustainability challenge, take the responsibility and make a difference. So we, in all this, in a master's program in business, because we said 40% of our curriculum is not about marketing, finance, and digital, but it's about exploring the values, dilemmas, and becoming a better person and taking responsibility for your dreams. And it has been an absolute blessing, and it has been so joyful to see several thousand of our alumni now attempting to find themselves and become better persons through this process. So thank you, Sudha, for asking.
Thank you, Anil. And it's interesting that basically you said that the best teachers actually experience. Nothing teaches you like experience does, right? And that's what Soil bases its entire program on. So, Marion, you are a practitioner, and this is precisely what you do, right? You create experiences to teach OBEP. Tell us a little about the kind of work that is being done in various countries that you oversee.
Thank you so much, Sudha, and thank you for inviting me and be part of this wonderful panel. It's like the passion, and I can really feel the whole education going through as we all educators, and it's like we want to jump on things. And for me, education of values is really education of the heart. That's what it is. It's with the heart chakra. It sits there. It's what we present, who we are, like the previous speaker said, and that's what it is all about. So yes, I'm a pre-academic, I would say, half academic and half practitioner. I came to South Africa more than 30 years ago. So I grew up in Europe with a Pierre de Coubertin background, also being a student at the Olympic Academy in Greece. And then having been now working for more than 30 years in the global south. South Africa, like India, has very similar problems and challenges with youth unemployment and crime. And yeah, the whole socioeconomic context is very, very similar. And to have those two worlds is very interesting to observe. I must also say I teach at the University of the Western Cape, where I direct the Center for Sport and Development, Sport Science and Development. And our rector, our chancellor was Archbishop Tutu for 18 years. So he was my boss, and working under him was the most humbling experience, because there is where values are portrayed, lived, shown to students. And Nelson Mandela got the first doctorate from our university. And when he got that, he said that what counts in life is not the fact that we have lived. It is the difference that we have made in the lives of others that determines the significance of the life we lead. And so this is something that I put here with all the speakers beforehand, and that is what we want to pass on to the next generation. And OVEP, Olympic Values Education, Universal Values, must also mention the Paralympic Values, courage, determination, equality, and then obviously the one that Senya described so beautifully, excellence to be the best that you can be. And when you do fair play, it's on the field and off the field. This is what our youth needs. This is the guidance that our youth needs. And sometimes they do not have parents that transfer those values. So they're single-headed households, they're child-headed households, and that is the challenge in the areas where we live. So Olympism on the Olympic values is a way of life. It's on and off the field. It's a way of life that you pass on. So we have done that in different ways. We also researched or did an assessment of what has been going on with OBEP up to 2018 with 175 countries, the ones that Xenia mentioned, and how OBEP has been implemented and what the results have been. And so OBEP can be really, as she said, the training of teachers is one that we have done, also of NOC officials, of coaches, of administrators, of managers of sport federations, because they all work and should work hand in hand. And then also the athletes. Interesting, we had an Olympic silver medalist the other day at our Pierre de Coubertin school in South Africa, who just came back from Tokyo, who had never heard about Olympic values. And she won the silver medal. So, we started now with a group here, but also international, of like looking at the athletes and how we can empower them to be the role models that they are already, but also spreading the word. And OBEP can be used in various ways, maybe also smaller sections and not the whole course at once, and where it fits in. What we do at the university, we have a master's in sport and development and international diploma for sports development and peace, together with the United Nations, and their Olympic value education plays a role, is part of our modules. So our graduates, postgraduates that are all professionals go back with that knowledge into their communities to implement it in their sports clubs, in their choirs, in their faith-based organizations, in their churches, and so on. And then the big role that we also have in our country, we're very lucky that we have government policy. We have like a women's policy now that has been passed. So we look at government policies. Is sport and peace and development part of it? If not, then we have to advocate that it has to be part of it. Now South Africa has it. And we now just this week, we were really honored to have the Bindra Foundation at our international 8th International Conference for Sport Development and Peace presenting, and government was there, the minister was there. And we just have a review of our sports policy. And the minister committed that this field will be part of the review and be actually written up as a part of the sports policy. Once it is in a sports policy, whether it's education or sport or social development, it is much easier to access to anyone, whether it's your NGOs, whether it's your universities, education organizations, and so on. But to make sure that it is actually part of the overall umbrella sport policy of a country is crucial. And to monitor that is also very crucial. Then there are Pierre de Coubertin schools in various countries that promote it. We also have one here that is another avenue where one can go. And we have done, for example, an OBEP course where we taught a mixture of teachers, NOC officials, and coaches in Botswana, and they rolled it out in the schools together. And that's an amazing case study that we wrote up and that we also can make available as an example, for example. And we had 54 Mass Opportunity Center coaches in South Africa that also did the whole program and are now also implementing it in their communities from different sporting codes. That's another case study that I could make available if people are interested how sports federations could implement it. Yes, and then I would say that we had Peace Heritage Games, for example, that is part of OBEP 2.0. I'm not sure whether it has been. I saw from Xenia that there is now a 3.0 and the 2 is a 4.0. Yes, that was also something where we do. It's like an amazing race that we do with youth. So the youth goes out in group of 8, a mixed group, and then they visit peace heritage sites and discuss values and share them and make video clips. And so video clips and stories are very important for us. So we're using podcasts of youth and adults and the transfer of values. And that is something that we really also cherish very much, because stories is something that everybody connects with stories. I brought one. I don't know whether Amit is able to show it. It's a 2-minute video, and Archbishop Tutu's daughter, Tandy, introduces 2 of our Olympians, silver medalist Elana Mayer and Chester Williams, to speak about the Olympic values. And I hope it can play. I just sent it in today, so I hope it can play.
Equalizer. Particularly for our children, sport gives them something to dream of being.
Chester Williams is a former South African rugby player, best known as the star winger of the South African national Springbok team that won the 1995 Rugby World Cup against New Zealand, their first post-apartheid win. He tells us how his mother helped him.
No one believed in me as an individual when it comes to the rugby field. I was always deemed to be too small, could not kick, could not pass. But my mother was the one that always inspired me to be where I am today, because she was saying, doesn't matter what they say, I believe in you and I know you're going to be successful one day. When it comes to excellence, we train hard, and honestly, once you achieve it, you see the rewards in the end of all the training you've done. The most important thing for friendship is trust, the respect and the communication. The Olympic values, those are the values that I believe in.
Not every child is going to be a gold medalist, but every child can have respect and care for their body and integrity of spirit and sportsmanship.
Elana Mayer is a South African former long-distance runner and Olympic medalist. She talks about what she received from her mother.
My mom was definitely one of the most inspirational people in my life. Her absolute unconditional love that she had, not only for me, but for everybody. She was there, good eyes, bad eyes. Her unconditional love really gave me to be brave, to really become the person that I'm meant to be, to try new things, not to be scared of failing.
What sport does, it gives you the characteristics that will help you along in life and help you to be a full human being. You don't have to be the greatest sports person, but you can have sporting values, and that makes you the greatest person.
Amit. So that was just an example. We did that with 40 leaders in South Africa, including the Mandelas and the Tutus, looking at values and how they were transmitted in the sports people as well. And so we use those clips. We use it also when we teach OVEP. It has been really proven so successful. Where do the values come from? And also helps with the gender violence in terms of the roles of mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and we often forget the mothers. Everybody knows a Nelson Mandela or Abhinav Bindra, but how many know the name of their mothers? So, and where do those values come from? How do they get transferred? So this has been very important. So we also would then promote, for example, assessment tools to measure the social behavioral change that those values actually display and where the people go. So yeah, so whether it's research, whether it's teaching, but definitely implementation in terms of the community. It has been a wonderful 30 years now nearly of being part of the Olympic family and contributing here and also internationally. So yeah, it's been really, really special with OVEP and with the Olympic family. Thank you.
Thanks. Zenia, if we were to look at India, where should we start? How do we even start looking at the process of introducing Olympism in our curriculum, integrating OVEP into our curriculum and mainstreaming it, as part of our education process, either through policy or through practice. I think, I heard Marion say policy is important. You said, look, practice is important, so just walk us through where should we start? We have 500 people listening to you today. So where do we start?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think both policy and practice are equally important because policy can really help us take the practice to the next level. Practice, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, can be started today by anyone with enough motivation and interest for it. There is no small steps in OVEP. Any step counts. Now, when it comes to policy, what we usually do is we work with the National Olympic Committee, of course, that sort of is supposed to drive the process in each country. Now, sometimes, given different circumstances, either because the National Olympic Committee is too small, sometimes National Olympic Committee is only one person, right? So we encourage to build partnerships. And we are, I keep saying this, I feel like I'm a broken record. We're really stronger together. And by building partnerships within each country, between different foundations, different governing bodies, educational authorities, we can really take it to the next level. So when it comes to India, I understand that the educational system is quite fragmented, and each of the administrational entities has its own rules and regulations when it comes to education. There are private schools, there are public schools, there are different levels of education. It's hard to centralize one approach, but it's always, at least our goal, the best possible achievable result is to embed OVEP elements or OVEP program into national curriculum. Again, it's a long road. For some, it's a very long road. It's much easier to do in smaller countries where everything is centralized. We saw the example of Lithuania. They were very successful in embedding it into their national curriculum. It's now the national curriculum. They have a network of trainers, network of coaches, network of teachers. I think what needs to be done is really have this desire to implement something, work with different practitioners who have successfully implemented similar programs in different countries. What Marion mentioned, really have this exchange of experience on how to move forward. I think you have enough will to do it. And I know India and Indian parents and educators put strong emphasis on education. And education in India is something that is very important and central. So I think starting small, but growing it through partnerships, through collaborations, through learning from other countries, other NOCs, others who have successfully implemented similar programs is key. But I have to say, I don't have a simple answer for you. And I cannot tell you this is how you do it. But a good thing is to start somewhere. And of course, I'm there to help and try and build bridges and connect you to people who've been successful in similar things in the past. We organize NOC exchanges on the subjects on education, on OVEP in particular. So happy to share and happy to help build these bridges.
Thank you so much for that. Shaheen, you're the one who's working in this industry, right? Tell us, what will it take? I mean, Xenia has offered all her resources. Marion's given us a lot of ideas. Anil has told us that it's critical, right? Even for people to be, to function well in the corporate world. What will it take to get this implemented in the Indian education system? I mean, it's just values curriculum and definitely values through Olympism because of all the benefits that it brings.
Yeah, Sudha, I mean, we're still sitting, I'm still sitting in a state in India where schools are not open and they've been shut for 18 months. And so I think there are like massive gaping needs that our kids are facing right now in India. I think that's always been the case, but I think it's been greatly exaggerated by the pandemic. Keeping that context in mind, I think that the best way of having something like this become integrated is really helping people see the connections back to some of the problems that are perceived today as being the most urgent problems. So if foundational literacy and numeracy is a nationwide mission today in India, then how do these values, how can they be linked to that goal? If teacher training programs are being rolled out at scale, then again, what is the connection between values and existing programs? So that's one thing I would really think about. I wouldn't think about it as something extra, because something extra right now in the system, there is going to be very real and understandable resistance to. I think the other thing is very similar to what Xenia said. I would just say, like, individuals who want to start, showcase and amplify those examples, like celebrate those examples instead of mandating something top down, which may end up facing a lot of resistance in the execution of it. Make it so exciting that people want to do it. And even if small numbers of people do it initially, those examples can really be amplified and build a lot of interest. And the third and my biggest bet for any change in education in India is like go directly to kids. You know, I think we all sit in these webinars, and I always come into these webinars and I'm waiting and I'm looking for like, where is the child in the webinar? And I usually never end up seeing a student, even though we're talking about like how to integrate things into schools. And I say that with no disrespect, but just because I think the solution is we need to bring kids into this discussion. If kids want to own something, if they see themselves as partners in this work, they will find ways to drive it forward. And so that idea of what does partnership with students look like for anything we want to implement? And are we asking and listening to them and saying like, what are the values you believe are most important? Like, how do you think that this can best happen? I think if we start listening to our children, the pace of change will greatly accelerate.
Great point, actually. Anil, you know, parents obviously have a key role to play, right? I mean, when we look at education, it's usually about numeric and verbal literacy and stuff like that. So how would you go about motivating parents to get involved in this process? I don't think we can do it without them, right?
See, I work as the managing trustee of Chinmay Mission, and in our organization, we run 100 schools with 100,000 children. And what we have, the schools in which they co-create a vision and a plan, where parents, teachers, staff, and the local community gets together, and they begin to do small things. You know, during the pandemic, there was this experience that one of the schools, the teachers and staff got together and said, you know, we are going to find a way to, even though we are not coming to school, we are going to do something on video with each other to encourage movement, to encourage games, to encourage us to bond together. So when parents became partners and they were not considering it as an extra work, or teachers are trying to pass on their work to me. But when they said, this is something we are doing together, we are co-creating the vision, we own it, we take pride, we want our school to succeed, then magic begins to happen, you know. So I think we need to have that dialogue. We need to make them partners. We did that also a few years back with the Doon School, which is one of our best residential schools. We got all parents and alumni and students and staff and teachers to create their own vision for transforming Doon School in that direction. And it worked beautifully, because then instead of just being critics who were giving feedback and parent and student teacher bodies, they were now taking ownership and responsibility and co-creating. So that's how it happened.
Thank you. So this has been really illuminating, and I have a bunch of other questions, but I also have some questions from the audience. So I'm going to kind of go to those first and then come back to my questions if we have time. We had some questions sent in to us, and I'm going to kind of combine some of these. You know, there is, I think, Shaheen, this one you'll have to take because it's interesting. There is this new education policy, and there are a couple of questions around that. How can, Lokesh Bagri says, how can new education policy in India help in creating a sport-friendly environment at school? And what is the role of society or NGO at grassroots levels in this? And another question there is that, do you think that the art integration and sports integration cross-curriculum pedagogical approaches are administratively feasible, and what needs to be done, you know, to make it feasible? I mean, it's a long question, so I'm just summarizing it for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just share a little bit. I mean, I think it's, you know, we're at a place where, again, our needs are so basic in some ways, and our gaps are so big that I think the tendency is to focus on the basics, and unfortunately what gets sidelined is the sports, is the arts, and I just think it's such a shame, and we need to like dramatically shift and change that. How is it going to change, and how will the NEP overall get implemented? Like, my very simplistic answer is that everything comes down to people. And it's people who have the will and the passion, people who have the staying power to work at something and make it happen. And I think what we need to do is infuse leadership at every level of the system that holds the values that we want to be seeing mirrored in our classrooms and in our children. Unless that happens, I think it's going to be very difficult for any of these things to get integrated, whether it's a sports program, whether it's arts, whether it's values. I think it comes down to, what do people who have power and influence today actually believe is important for children? And are they even keeping children's needs at the center of those decisions? Often in education, we make the assumption that everything is about the kids. My experience is very often we lose the plot and it doesn't become about the kids at all. It becomes about all the other peripheral tensions in the system. And so I would say, yeah, let's get some of our most committed people that believe deeply in values, people that are able to see the future. How do we get those people to be in the system at all levels? And how do we, I mean, Anil spoke really beautifully right now about how do we bring people together? So it's not a top-down vision, but really create platforms for collective learning, collective storytelling, collective action.
Anil, would you like to add to that?
I think what Shaheen has mentioned is, quite remarkable in one thing. I believe greatly in the power of pilot projects. So let's start with a small pilot and let's experiment and let's learn. And I love the idea of students being co-creators, because, children these days, God has become more quality conscious. That the kids that are coming out these days are far more aware, far more enthusiastic, and they're very willing to learn. And, we did a conference of MBA students with the Shiv Nada school, and little kids and teenagers were working with these 25, 30-year-old MBA types and working on projects. And, the MBA students learned a lot from the teenagers. They said, these guys are much more global. They have so much to contribute to the world. So I think if we get students involved and we unshackle their fears and say, we are willing to experiment with you, none of us have the answers. Let us not as educators pretend that we have all the answers. I think we have to create a space in which we discover the answers rather than prescribe answers to people. That would be my approach.
Nice. So we have a question from Sudhir. I think this is for Marion and Xenia. How far have we succeeded in achieving values through or goals through Olympism? I mean, has there been any empirical study which measures how, whether values have been imbibed and
Yeah, so we have a system of monitoring and evaluation. I have to admit that in the past 2 years, everything's been kind of on pause because of the COVID crisis. There are several levels of evaluation that we apply to the programs. We commission sometimes the monitoring and evaluation reports to see what impact the OVEP had in different countries. Each of the different NOCs that implements OVEP also has its own monitoring and evaluation system. So sometimes we get those numbers as well, saying this many people participated, this is the impact that we've reached, this is where we're trying to go, and this is where we are at the moment. And we also get a lot of stats from Olympic Solidarity, of course, who's funding most of the OVEP implementation projects. So they have their own newly developed digital system that logs in all the requests related to the OVEP projects and feeds into a global monitoring and evaluation. Now, the essence of the questions, of course, to see if we have a real insight into how OVEP changed lives of children, across the globe. That's a much more difficult question to answer. But at the same time, it's for us at least, it's not about the quantity, but rather about quality, which is also a standard answer, but it's really about the quality. If we manage to implement even a smaller change, we're happy about the outcome. We have very small countries that make amazing projects with very limited resources. One recent example, for example, is Cambodia. Cambodia has been trying to build on expertise in OVEP implementation, and they've been doing a lot with very little. They try to go to schools, they try to stage Olympic days, different events, and the impact is really all about, trying and see what can be done with little, but also all the new projects stemming in the last years. So we see that there's a lot of interest. I think it's a good indicator. I receive on average 3 to 5 OVEP implementation requests per week. And usually those come from developing countries, which shows that really the developing countries are the ones that really need help, that are really interested in OVEP or value-based education, driving the education of their children. I was going to mention something else, but as I was talking about Cambodia, I forgot about it. But it's not, again, it's not an easy question. We do have monitoring and evaluation in place, but the real impact is really going to span across so many years that, it's hard to answer at the moment of, have you seen the real impact of OVEP programs? We do daily, and especially with examples coming from small initiatives, not only the large initiatives, because large initiatives are easier to quantitate. Another thing that helps us see a lot of impact is our partnerships with international organizations. That's where we see a lot of interests, a lot of communications around it. Most recent was, for example, republishing sports values in every classroom. That was done in partnership with UNESCO, WADA, IPC, Fair Play Committee. Okay. So we had a new toolkit and the translation guidance document published for that. We are forming a partnership with UNODC that will embed OVEP into drug use and crime prevention projects. So I think the best indicator of the power of OVEP that there is this never-ending interest in the program, interest that comes from our NOC partners and interest that comes from our international organizations partners.
Okay, I have a really interesting question, and we have 1 minute, to answer this. So anyone can take this. Yeah. This says, values validate vision in sports and society. But how does one resolve conflict in values? I thought it was interesting, right? Anybody? Marion, you want to take that?
Well, I wanted to add something on what Sinia said, but I'm taking that.
Go ahead.
I wanted to just say that the online COVID has really opened up the field of many more countries being interested, because when we did the research in 2018, it was from 65 countries that came back to us. It was only 19 who were really active face-to-face, training teachers and train the trainers. But with the online, it has been really opened up, and it is much more difficult to trace. But it would be very interesting to do a similar study that we did from the 5 years prior to 2018 to follow up and say in which countries is what done, and how can countries also link, especially in the global south. If you have partner countries and you do the trainer, who can train for other countries then again in terms of online. So that's a discussion, but that is a separate discussion. You have conflict in values. If you have conflict, there is mostly already a difference of values, and every crisis situation or conflict management comes down to your values again. How do you solve a conflict? You look at your values. and very often we have different values and we don't know each other, and that causes a conflict. So it's like it's like a chicken and egg situation in a way. But OVEP can certainly do that, because, I mean, it's living the values. So you cannot play fair on the field and then you go home and hit your wife, for example. That would not work. So fair play is that value, off the field, on the field, friendship, joy of effort, balance between God, body, will, and mind. If you go to the Oracle of Delphi, if you climb all up where the ancient Olympics came from, there's 2 sentences inscribed in the stones. One is, know yourself. Know thyself, it says. And secondly, it said, everything in moderation. So this was ancient Greek wisdom linked with Olympism, and that's how they came into existence. And if we look at that and look at respect for values and tolerance and unity in diversity, as Mandela said, then we go a long way.
Thank you so much.
It's all about focusing on similarities rather than on our differences, and seeing opportunities rather than obstacles. With that, everything is possible if we adopt this positive mind frame.
Thank you. We are really out of time. Abhinav, may I request you to come in with your concluding remarks and also a word of thanks. And thank you, panelists. This has been really illuminating for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sudha. I'd like to start by saying thank you to Xenia and to Marion for participating in this webinar, and really for their wonderful insights on the Olympic Value Education program, and perhaps the ways it can be implemented here in India. The IOC has long been a flag bearer of achieving peace and development through sport, and we're really fortunate to receive your mentorship as we embark on this journey started by you. To Shaheen, thank you very much for being part of this initiative. Through the Teach for India Fellowship, you really have built a community of leaders that is revolutionizing education in India. And we at the Abhinav Bindra Foundation look up to you in our shared aim of bringing education reforms in the country, and maybe make a collaborative effort to introduce sport-based value education into the system. To Anil, thank you so much for joining us today. Your vast experience in leadership, building and successes of values-based initiatives, School of Inspired Leadership makes you an important figure upon whom we can rely for guidance and direction. I'd also like to take this opportunity of thanking our very own Sudha for acting as a moderator for the session and asking some really thought-provoking questions, to the answers to which we hope helped the viewers gain a wider understanding of this topic. It is important for us to keep such conversations going, as it will take a collaborative effort to spread the message of Olympism amongst the larger society. I hope the momentum we are building through these webinars will serve perhaps as a stepping stone towards some much bigger things with an even larger community from all walks of life. Thank you to all the listeners as well for attending this webinar. It is really heartening to see that this initiative resonates with so many of us. I hope we can keep growing together and implement these learnings in all the endeavors we undertake in the future. See you all in next webinar, and thank you again for joining us today.
Just one housekeeping point. If anyone would like to know more, please write in to us at olympism@abft.in. It'll be in your chat box. Please check it out. That's our email ID. Please write in to us, give us your suggestions, ask us questions, just engage with us. Thank you.
Thank you.